I want to collect information about the sock colour. I want to do a survey. How would you do it? I think there's different ways. Jake's already said one technique. Is it?
Yes.
Have a look. I can see 3 ways you could do this. So if you've got one, try and think of another one. Emily, give me your method. How would you, I'll call your method method 1. How would you do it?
Randomly,
How would you do that?
just randomly choose what you think others would think.
So you would get every kid in the school, their name, you'd put it into a hat and randomly draw it. Is that what you're saying? Or are you just saying you would make your decision? No, that's not a sampling technique. That's a dictatorship. That's Emily saying, I'm the boss, this is what we're doing.
Every big survey.
You do a big survey. I don't want to ask everyone, but how do I pick who I'm surveying? Randomly, so that's get everyone's name, put them into a hat. Yeah. So names in a hat. And you called that the random method. I like that. The random names in a hat. What, 100 kids say? Everyone goes in a hat? Cool. Yep. Every fifth person where? Every fifth person that? Yep. I hope you're writing this in your book. Every fifth person that enters the school.
And us, like a bunch of people in each grade.
A bunch of people from each grade. So you're saying you look at the population of people.
Yeah, so like probably 20 from grade 7, 20 from grade 8.
Yep.
And then maybe 20 staff.
Yep. Sounds good. So you break up into groups and pick an appropriate amount. Now, my question is as follows. Look, let's say hypothetically this school is made up of 4 grades of equal numbers. 200 kids in every grade. There's 100 staff. If you were to pick 20 students from each grade, how many staff should you choose? Why 20? There's only 100 staff and there's 200 kids in every grade.
Yeah.
Should you still pick 20 staff?
Yeah.
I can see a reason why, but keep it even, that's a good argument. Is there a reason why we maybe shouldn't?
Because they're not wearing it, so why would they care?
Okay, Emery's dictatorship begins today.
Yeah.
We're changing the uniform. Why should we maybe reduce the number of staff that gets a vote?
Skewed data.
The skewed data, because there is half as many staff, correct? How many staff should vote? 10. Correct? If you've got 20 votes for each grade, you should have 10 votes for the staff, shouldn't you? Yeah. Because you've got 90 votes in total, and 900 people in total. I hate to tell you this, guys, but year 10's the smallest cohort, so you'd have the least say. Because I reckon year 7's a lot of White Sox. Yeah, love it. So these methods here, you've actually identified the 3 methods of sampling. We're going to give them a name though. And these are called sampling techniques. We gave us one name. The random sample. Leave a bit of space, we're going to talk about each one. Method 2. What's a good name for method 2? See if we can find the name on our own. It's a something sample here. Stratified. It's a good word, but it's not quite the one we're looking for. Give me a hint, it starts with the same letter.
What does stratified mean?
Selective.
Selective. I don't mind, that's a good idea. It's not the name they use, but it's a pretty good name. And it's
Systematic.
systematic. Why do you think they call it systematic? Why do they call it systematic?
Like confused people.
Does it?
Yes.
It looks like we've got a system in place. Every fifth person. All students whose names end in A or B. Cool? Does that make sense? I can clarify a bit more if you like. There's a system, you see. Every fifth person, that's the system, so they call it systematic. It's a good system, isn't it? And the last one is stratified. Because stratified is when you break things into levels. So this is like you're breaking the groups up into, breaking the different stakeholders up into their groups and taking a subsection of that. So stratifying is when you break up your population. Cool? So what's the advantage of a random sample? It's not impacted by bias, obvious bias. What's the challenge behind a random sample? If I wanted to do a random sample of the population of Mackay, what would be the problem?
Take like 50 boys and 10 girls.
It's easy enough, that's sort of stratifying it. If I've got, when I said with Lucy before, really easy to do a random sample of Mercy, correct? We just get all your names, we throw them into a hat, we call out the right, or 50 names or 100 names, correct? What's the problem with Mackay? A lot of names? Do I know exactly who's living in Mackay? How would I get that information? I can't, can I? I'll have to use the census data. The census data is unlikely to tell me the names of people though. So for most people it's impossible to get random data outside of an organisation. So how would I do random sampling? Pick a house, go knock on some doors. What's the problem with that? That's a good technique, better than most. What's wrong with it though? What if I was in the richest street in town and I walked up and knocked on 5 doors in a row? Would that represent this? It's bias, isn't it? So random samples are great if we can actually get a random sample. The challenge is it's very difficult to get a random sample. That's a bad view. So let's use the Mercy example. Let's say I get after the 5, every 5th kid that walks into that entrance of the school, one down the side there. What's the problem with that? Who doesn't go through that gate? Which group of students don't go through that gate? Okay.
Box.
Bus. Kids who catch the bus, correct? Who else doesn't go through the gate? Jack?
Get dropped off.
People get dropped off at the back or at the front. Who else? Bike riders, correct? So the population I've got might be skewed. If I ask the question about the mountain biking club and I didn't include the bike riders in my sample, am I going to get a fair representation? Likely the same thing if I go sit myself at the bike racks and ask, should mountain biking be a compulsory sport at Mercy? What are the bikers going to say? They're going to say yes, correct? So the problem with the systematic sample is what? My placement has to be good and my system can't be biased. So what's the advantage before we go to the challenge? What's the advantage? Of these three, what is the... It's easy, isn't it? We just get every 5th person or every 7th person. The challenge is system can be biased, even without intending it to be. Now the last one, stratified samples. Who thinks that's the fairest way to collect data? We get 20 kids from year 7, 20 from year 8, 20 from year 9, 20 from year 10, and 10 staff. Who thinks that's the fairest way to do it? Seems like a pretty fair way to me, correct? So it's reasonably fair, so it gets a good spread of people. There are 2 challenges. What are they?
The different numbers in boys and girls.
Yeah, so that's leading to one of the challenges. You're 100% correct. So we're breaking people into certain groups. But is it ever possible? Are you just one thing? Are you just a year 10 student? Mark's also a cricket player. Jake's a rugby league player, correct? If I was to walk down to the shops in Macquarie and put people in the groups, what's the problem? Is it very simple to put people in the groups?
Yeah.
Does that represent what actually is going on? No, it doesn't. You're not just a year 10 student. Some of you are boys, some of you are girls, some of you like sports, some of you like all sorts of things. So the problem with stratified samples in group 2 simply, what else is a challenge? Think back to my Mackay example. I could really easily get a random sampling in Mercy, couldn't I? I just get all your names and throw it in a hat. Same thing with your year levels. I could put you in year 7, year 8, year 9, year 10. Could I do that in Mackay? Why not?
Don't know everyone.
Don't know everyone. I don't know what groups they're in. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into collecting that data, correct? So it's also time consuming.